Sarah stared at her dashboard, anxiety rising. 23 customer calls this week against a target of 30. Average call duration creeping up above the mandated 15 minutes. Only 8 value add emails sent when she needed 10. The numbers were clear. She was falling behind on her KPIs. But those numbers couldn't capture what really happened this week. The hour-long conversation that helped a customer completely reimagine their workflow. The quick 5-minute check-in that prevented a major implementation issue. The detailed response email that a customer called transformative for their team. She knew she was creating real value. Her customer's success proved it. Yet, according to the metrics that determined her performance, none of that deeper impact mattered as much as hitting arbitrary contact quotas. This daily disconnect between genuine value creation and mechanical measurement reveals a profound tension at the heart of modern business. The very systems we've built to recognize and reward value often prevent it from being created. This is the measurement trap. You might recognize this trap in your organization when marketing teams labor under the constant burden to justify their existence through increasingly complex metrics, while other departments operate with fundamentally different standards of evidence. When customer success representatives track call quotas and resolution times rather than focusing on genuine customer outcomes. When teams spend more time reporting on their work than actually doing it. What if measurement existed not to control value, but to enable it? What if we measured not to justify, but to learn, not to divide, but to unite, not to restrict, but to illuminate? Today, we're going to explore both the trap and the alternative in depth. You'll learn how to recognize the specific ways the measurement trap manifests in your organization, creating friction that prevents natural value flow. You'll understand the core principles of value-first measurement and how they can transform your organization's relationship metrics. And you'll develop practical first steps to begin shifting from trapped to transformed, creating measurement systems that enable rather than restrict natural value creation. By the end of our session, you'll have both the recognition patterns to identify where current measurement approaches fight against natural value flow, and the practical guidance to begin creating alternatives that enable it. Welcome to day 8 of our Value First Framework series. I'm Chris Carolan, and I'm excited to continue our exploration of how industrial age thinking creates mounting friction in our digital world and how we can break free through the value first approach. Yesterday, or Friday rather, we explored the ERP trap and the Value First Platform Manifesto. Tomorrow, we'll be looking at the conformity trap in the Value First Culture Manifesto, examining how uniformity suppresses authentic flourishing. But today, we're focusing on something that affects almost every business function and team member: the measurement trap and the Value First Measurement Manifesto. This is particularly important because measurement approaches don't just track behavior, they shape it, often in ways that prevent natural value flow. Now, the measurement trap began with a reasonable desire for business accountability, but transformed into a system of artificial constraints. What worked perfectly in industrial settings, measuring factory outputs with mechanical precision, became misaligned as organizations evolved toward knowledge work and relationship development. Let's look at a concrete example. A marketing director I worked with spent 3 weeks building a comprehensive attribution model to justify a small team expansion. while her counterpart in sales secured a much larger budget increase based on a 10-minute conversation. Same company, radically different evidence standards. This asymmetry isn't just unfair, it creates systemic misalignment that prevents natural value flow across the entire organization. When organizations apply radically different evidence standards across functions, they create structural barriers to integration and collaboration. Think about the typical customer journey. The same prospect interaction gets viewed through entirely different lenses depending on whether it's considered a marketing qualified lead or a sales opportunity. Rather than experiencing a seamless value path, customers feel the friction created by these measurement driven handoffs. The problem compounds as organizations invest in increasingly sophisticated measurement infrastructure. Each new measurement layer adds cost without proportional insight, creating data noise that obscures rather than reveals the actual patterns of value creation. As organizations scale their measurement efforts, the costs multiply. See rising technology investments in attribution platforms and analytics infrastructure, often with minimal returns. Organizations find themselves spending more on measuring marketing than on marketing itself. Growing headcount dedicated to measurement rather than value creation. With marketing organizations building entire teams focused on data management and reporting, while actual creative resources remain constrained. Lengthening planning cycles as each initiative must be pre-justified through elaborate business cases, creating institutional inertia that prevents rapid response to market opportunities. And widening credibility gaps as the disconnect between reported metrics and observed business outcomes becomes impossible to ignore. Marketing might hit all its KPIs while business results falter, creating fundamental questions about the entire measurement approach. Beyond the visible investments in measurement infrastructure, organizations suffer deeper costs. Value distortion, as activities shift towards what's measurable rather than what's valuable. Teams gradually focus on improving metrics rather than improving outcomes. Talent frustration, as creative professionals spend increasing time justifying their work rather than doing it, leading to burnout and turnover of precisely the innovative minds organizations need most. Loss of long term perspective, as immediate measurable impacts are prioritized over sustained but less quantifiable value creation. And risk aversion, as leaders avoid potentially valuable initiatives that don't fit neatly into established measurement frameworks. Innovation naturally involves uncertainty that mechanical metrics struggle to accommodate. Now, organizations typically respond to these limitations not by questioning the paradigm itself, but by adding complexity. More granular attribution models that promise to capture the exact customer touchpoint that deserves credit for a conversion, creating an illusion of precision while missing how decisions actually form. Dashboard proliferation, providing ever more visualizations of fundamentally limited data. Organizations create more ways to see the same metrics rather than questioning whether those metrics actually capture what matters. And these approaches share a common flaw. They attempt to perfect measurement rather than questioning whether our measurement paradigm itself is aligned with how value actually flows. And this trap demonstrates how industrial age thinking creates mounting friction in modern organizations. The pressure begins with reasonable requests for marketing accountability, typically driven by historical skepticism about marketing's impact. Measurement systems proliferate as marketing responds with increasingly sophisticated attribution models and metrics. Activities shift toward what generates favorable measurements rather than what creates more value. Other functions maintain different standards, creating systemic misalignment and friction. Resources increasingly flow to measurement itself rather than value creation. And the organization becomes trapped in a cycle of proving value rather than creating it, with more energy spent on justification than innovation. This reflects a fundamental application of industrial thinking to inherently post industrial activities. We try to measure customer relationship development with the same mechanical precision we might measure factory outputs, creating artificial constraints that fight against natural value flow. There's an alternative. At the heart of the Value First Measurement Manifesto are these fundamental beliefs that transform how we think about metrics and accountability. First, measurement exists to enable value, not to control it. Metrics should illuminate possibilities rather than enforce compliance. Second, value flows across boundaries, not within silos. Our measurement approaches should recognize and enable this natural flow rather than creating artificial barriers. Third, evidence standards should be consistent, not selective. We cannot demand mechanical precision from some departments while allowing intuitive judgment from others. Hi, sales. Fourth, understanding requires both numbers and narrative. Numbers tell us what happened, but stories tell us why it matters. And fifth, now not everything valuable can be immediately measured. You must create space for unmeasurable but essential activities that create enormous long term value. From these beliefs emerges the Value First Measurement Manifesto with 10 key principles that transform how organizations approach metrics. Number one, we will measure collective impact over departmental attribution, prioritizing shared outcomes that unite teams rather than metrics that divide them into competing silos. Number two, we will apply consistent evidence standards across all functions, not demanding mechanical precision from marketing while giving other departments human latitude. Number three, we will measure to learn, not to justify, transforming measurement from a tool of judgment into an instrument of insight. Number four, we will acknowledge measurement limitations transparently, being honest about what our metrics can and cannot reveal. Number five, we will value human judgment in measurement interpretation, using metrics as inputs to wisdom rather than replacements for it. Number six, we will create space for the unmeasurable, protecting activities whose impact resists precise measurement but creates genuine transformation. Number seven, we will honor qualitative understanding alongside quantitative metrics, giving equal weight to narrative understanding in human context. Number eight, we will extend our measurement horizons, creating space for value that develops and compounds over time. Number nine, we will embrace signals over scores, recognizing patterns of natural value flow rather than reducing relationships to numerical scores. Number 10, we will measure the flow, not just the outcome, focusing on how value moves through our systems, not just what appears at the end. Now, the value first approach transforms how measurement shapes the natural progression through all 8 stages of the value path. For audience members who are saying, I am learning, traditional measurement focuses on capturing contact information through form completions. Value first measurement tracks natural exploration patterns and depth of engagement without requiring artificial barriers to content access. This creates more authentic early stage relationships built on value rather than extraction. For researchers who say, I am researching, traditional approaches measure content consumption volume and score leads based on activity levels. Value first measurement recognizes natural investigation patterns and enables seamless exploration without forced progression, creating space for authentic understanding development. For hand raisers who say, I am buying, traditional measurement counts conversion rates through the funnel and measures qualification efficiency. Value first measurement tracks how well we respond to natural signals of interest, focusing on the quality of the connection rather than quantity of processing. For heroes are highly empowered revenue opportunities who say, I'm considering options. Traditional metrics focus on closing percentages and sales cycle velocity. Value first measurement examines how effectively we enable authentic conviction building, recognizing that sustainable decisions emerge from genuine alignment rather than persuasion pressure. For value creators who say, I must create value for the organization, the first stage after purchase. Traditional approaches measure implementation timelines and project completion. Value first measurement focuses on actual value realization, progress, and capability development, recognizing that successful onboarding goes far beyond technical deployment. For adopters who say, I realize your value, traditional metrics track customer retention rates and renewal percentages. Value first measurement examines value expansion patterns and natural optimization, focusing on how relationships deepen and value compounds over time. For advocates who say, I tell others about you, traditional measurement counts referrals and case study production. Value first measurement recognizes natural sharing patterns and community contribution, focusing on authentic advocacy rather than incentivized promotion. For champions who say, I am a raving fan, traditional approaches measure influence scores and ambassador program participation. Value first measurement tracks community leadership emergence and practice advancement, focusing on how champions naturally elevate entire fields through their commitment. The value first approach fundamentally shifts measurement from a control mechanism to an enablement system. Rather than forcing artificial progression through predetermined stages, it recognizing and supports natural value flow, creating the conditions for genuine relationships to develop at their organic pace. This transformation creates dramatic benefits. Teams unite around shared outcomes rather than competing on departmental metrics. Organizations create protected space for exploration and experimentation, internally and externally. And measurement becomes a positive rather than negative force in organizational culture. Let's talk about practical transformation. How do you know if your organization is caught in the measurement trap? Look for these telling signs. Metric inconsistency across functions. Different functions operate with fundamentally different evidence standards, creating organizational friction. The weekly numbers spiral. Teams spend increasing time reporting on their work rather than doing it. The attribution obsession, considering considerable resources go to determining which touch point deserves credit for customer actions. Measurement overhead growth. The resources dedicated to tracking, reporting, and analyzing performance continually expand. And lastly, declining trust despite more data. Despite having more measurement than ever before, confidence in team performance actually decreases. Maybe that's because we're spending all this time worrying about data and attribution and all the things instead of the value that we create. Meanwhile, the more direct customer teams are interacting with customers every day, creating value, and naturally not spending nearly as much time focusing on the data and the reporting and the attribution, et cetera, et cetera. Let's put our teams in a position to win, maybe. What does that look like? If you're ready to begin breaking free from the measurement trap, here are practical first steps to initiate transformation. Conduct a measurement equity audit. Document the evidence standards applied to different departments. Identify where inconsistency creates organizational friction. Present findings without blame, focusing on system patterns. Develop shared outcome metrics. Identify 3 to 5 key outcomes that matter across departmental boundaries. Create shared visibility and ownership of these outcomes across functions. Begin shifting conversation from who gets credit to how did we collectively perform. Number 3, create space for the unmeasurable. Explicitly identify high value activities that resist immediate measurement. Establish learning budgets dedicated to exploration without predetermined return requirements. Create forums for sharing qualitative insights alongside quantitative data. Number 4, transform measurement conversations. Shift reporting meetings from justification to learning. Begin every metrics discussion with what did we learn rather than did we hit the target. Create psychological safety by openly acknowledging measurement limitations, like the dark funnel, word of mouth. Number 5, extend measurement horizons. Identify where short term metrics create long term problems. Develop balanced scorecards that include leading and lagging indicators. Create long term measurement cycles for activities with delayed impact. Now, as you implement value first measurement, or even as you bring it up for the first time, you'll likely encounter these common obstacles. But here's how to navigate them effectively. But we need accountability. Reframe accountability as collective commitment to outcomes rather than individual adherence to metrics. Demonstrate how shared outcomes create natural accountability through peer commitments. Start with small experiments that maintain accountability while reducing metric rigidity. Our executives demand these reports. Begin by adding context and learning alongside existing metrics rather than eliminating them. Gradually introduce qualitative insights that complement quantitative measures. Create executive allies who understand the limitations of current measurement approaches. We've invested too much in our current systems. Begin with measurement mindset rather than measurement infrastructure. Repurpose existing tools to support learning rather than just reporting. And focus on maximizing value from existing investments rather than replacing them. And if you've got full HubSpot platform and you've been focused on lead scoring, lead nurturing, all that stuff, you've got 5 other hubs you haven't touched yet, there's some space. There's some space to go focus on something else and get a ton of value. So, how will you know if your transformation is working? Look for these signs of progress: collaboration over competition. Teams naturally work together across functional boundaries without measurement driven friction. Learning over justification. Metrics discussions center on insights and improvements rather than explanations and defenses. Balance over extremes. Organizations maintain appropriate tension between short and long term focus, measurable and unmeasurable value. Flow over friction. Value moves naturally throughout the customer journey without artificial barriers created by incompatible metrics. You know those deals and opportunities that show up and close, everybody's surprised, happens faster than expected. That's what that is. Like there's flow happening. And by the time they need your help, they're ready to go. Trust is built. There's no friction. Lastly, look for energy shift toward value. Teams spend more time creating value and less time reporting on it. Today, we've explored how the measurement trap creates mounting friction in organizations and how value first measurement offers a transformative alternative. We've seen how industrial age thinking about measurement fights against natural value flow in the digital era, with organizations often applying radically different evidence standards across functions. We've explored the Value First Measurement Manifesto and its 10 key principles and examined how this approach transforms the entire value path, creating more natural progression from initial discovery through advocacy and championship. Here are specific actions you can take immediately to begin your transformation. Document the evidence standards applied to different departments in your next leadership meeting, creating awareness of any inconsistency. That's a tough one, but it's a tough conversation that needs to be had. Number 2, identify just one customer outcome that matters across functional boundaries and make it visible to all contributing teams. Number 3, create a simple learning budget specifically dedicated to high value activities that resist immediate measurement. Number 4, transform your next metrics review by starting with what did we learn rather than did we hit the target. And number 5, begin extending your measurement horizon by identifying one important initiative where short term metrics might be creating long term problems. For deeper reflection, consider these assessment questions. Where do different evidence standards create the most friction in your customer journey? What valuable activities are being systematically undervalued because they resist immediate measurement? How much time does your team spend measuring versus creating value? Is that balance sustainable? Where might shared outcome metrics create natural alignment across functions? Tomorrow, we'll continue our value first journey by exploring the conformity trap and the value first culture manifesto. We'll examine how uniformity suppresses authentic flourishing and how organizations can create environments where device talents naturally multiply. Please share your thoughts and questions in the comments. What resonated most strongly with you today? Where have you seen the measurement trap in your organization? I know everybody's seen it. What steps are you taking to break free from it? Thank you for joining today's session. I'm Chris Carolan, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we continue our Value First Framework series. Have a great Monday, everybody.